The white lace of Sarah Lancaster's wedding dress dragged through the dust of the small church floor as she stood at the altar, her hands trembling while she clutched a bouquet of wildflowers that were already beginning to wilt in the Nevada heat. It was June of 1876, and the entire population of Carson City seemed to have crammed themselves into the wooden pews to witness what was supposed to be the social event of the season. But the groom's spot beside her remained conspicuously empty, as the minutes stretched into a painful eternity. Reverend Matthews cleared his throat for the third time, his wrinkled face creased with concern as he glanced between Sarah and the church entrance. The congregation had started to whisper, a low buzz that grew louder with each passing moment. Sarah's father, William Lancaster, stood rigid in the front pew, his face turning an alarming shade of red as he gripped his hat with white knuckles. Her mother had already begun to cry softly into her handkerchief. Carter Blake sat in the back row, having only come to town that morning to pick up supplies before heading back to his ranch 20 miles outside of Carson City. He had wandered into the church purely by accident, thinking it was a general gathering, only to realize too late that he had stumbled into a wedding. Common courtesy kept him in his seat, but now he found himself wishing he had left when he had the chance. The young woman at the altar looked absolutely devastated, and his heart twisted with unexpected sympathy. A commotion at the church door made everyone turn. A young boy, no more than 12, came running down the aisle waving a piece of paper. He skidded to a stop in front of Sarah, panting heavily. "Miss Lancaster, I was told to give you this," he gasped, shoving the envelope into her hands before darting back out of the church as quickly as he had come. Sarah's fingers shook as she opened the letter. Carter watched her face drain of all color as she read, her lips moving silently. The bouquet slipped from her grasp and hit the floor with a soft thud. She looked up at the congregation, her green eyes wide with shock and humiliation. "He is not coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but in the stunned silence of the church, everyone heard her clearly. "Thomas has decided that he cannot marry me. He has taken the train to San Francisco with Miss Victoria Chen, the banker's daughter." The church erupted. Women gasped and began talking all at once. Men stood up, shouting about honor and disgrace. Sarah's father let out a roar of rage and stormed toward the door, presumably to hunt down the cowardly groom. Her mother fainted directly into the arms of her sister. Carter found himself standing without conscious thought, his body moving before his mind could catch up. He walked down the aisle, his boots echoing on the wooden floor, and every eye in the church turned to him. He was a stranger to most of them, a tall man of 26 with sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that touched his collar, and eyes the color of a summer storm. His clothes marked him as a working rancher, practical and worn but clean. He stopped in front of Sarah, who looked up at him with confusion cutting through her tears. Up close, he could see that her eyes were the most extraordinary shade of green, like new grass after a spring rain. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache, with auburn hair pinned up beneath her veil and delicate features that were currently twisted in anguish. "Miss Lancaster," he said, his voice steady despite the absolute insanity of what he was about to do. "I know you do not know me. My name is Carter Blake, and I own a cattle ranch outside of town. I have just witnessed the greatest act of foolishness any man could commit, and I find myself unable to stand by and let it happen." Sarah stared at him, her mouth opening slightly in confusion. "I do not understand." "You are clearly a woman of great courage and dignity, standing here with your head high even in the face of such humiliation," Carter continued. The entire church had gone silent again, everyone straining to hear what this stranger could possibly be saying. Any man who would abandon you is a fool not worth a moment of your tears. You deserve better than that. Thank you, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. That is kind of you to say, but I think I should just go home and try to salvage what little remains of my dignity. Carter took a deep breath. This was madness, complete and utter madness. But something in her eyes, some quality of strength beneath the pain, made him push forward with the crazy idea that had seized him. Or, he said slowly, you could marry me instead. The church exploded into chaos once more. The reverend nearly fell off the altar steps. Sarah's aunt, who had been tending to her unconscious sister, let out a shriek. But Carter kept his eyes locked on Sarah's face, watching the progression of emotions that flickered across her features. Shock, disbelief, confusion, and then something else, something that looked almost like hope. You cannot be serious, she said, but her voice held a question rather than a statement. I am completely serious, Carter replied. Look around you, Miss Lancaster. Everyone you know is here. They came dressed in their finest clothes. The reverend is already here. The church is decorated. It seems a shame to waste it all because one man was too blind to see what he had. But you do not even know me, Sarah protested, even as her eyes searched his face as if trying to divine his true intentions. That is true, Carter admitted. But I know enough. I know you are brave enough to stand here even when your world is falling apart. I know you are strong enough not to run away screaming even though you must want to. And I know that in about 30 seconds, people are going to start pitying you, and that pity will follow you for the rest of your life if you leave this church unwed. Sarah flinched at his words because they were true. She could already see it in the faces of the congregation, the women beginning to look at her with that awful, sympathetic expression that she knew she would never be able to escape. She would become Carson City's old maid, the woman who was left at the altar, the object of endless gossip and sad headshakes. Why would you do this? She asked. What could you possibly gain? Carter smiled for the first time, a warm expression that softened his weathered features. Honestly. A wife. I have been meaning to find one for years now, but running a ranch does not leave much time for courting. And I promise you this, Miss Lancaster. I may be a stranger, but I am a man of my word. If you marry me today, I will never abandon you. I will never humiliate you. I will treat you with respect and kindness for all of our days. Sarah looked down at her ruined bouquet on the floor, then back up at this strange man who had appeared like something out of a dream, or perhaps a miracle. Her mind raced through her options. She could run from the church and face a lifetime of pity and shame. She could stay in Carson City and endure the gossip, the sympathetic looks, the knowledge that Thomas had chosen someone else over her. Or she could take the hand of this stranger and leap into the unknown. I do not love you, she said quietly. I do not love you either, Carter replied honestly, but perhaps we could learn. In the meantime, we would have respect and partnership, which is more than many marriages start with. Sarah took a shuddering breath. Around them, the church remained silent, everyone waiting to see what she would do. She thought of Thomas, who had courted her for 8 months with pretty words and promises. Thomas, who had seemed so perfect, so charming, so attentive. And then Thomas, who had written her a letter rather than face her like a man, who had run away to another city with another woman on what was supposed to be their wedding day. She looked at Carter Blake, this stranger with kind eyes and a steady voice. He had nothing to gain from this except a wife, and from what she could see of his work-worn hands and practical clothing, he was not a wealthy man who needed her family's money. He was offering her a way out of her nightmare, a chance to walk out of this church with her head held high. Yes, she heard herself say, the word coming out stronger than she felt. Yes, I will marry you, Carter Blake. The church erupted once more, but this time there was an energy of excitement rather than scandal. The Reverend looked utterly befuddled, glancing between the two of them with wide eyes. "Are you certain about this, Miss Lancaster?" he asked, his voice heavy with concern. "This is a sacred covenant, not to be entered into lightly." "I am certain," Sarah said, and she was surprised to find that she meant it. "Please proceed with the ceremony." The Reverend opened his mouth as if to protest further, then seemed to think better of it. He had known Sarah Lancaster since she was a child, had watched her grow into a lovely young woman of 22, and he could see the determination in her eyes. Perhaps this was madness, but perhaps it was also a strange kind of providence. "Very well," he said, opening his Bible. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Carter held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Sarah placed hers in it. His palm was calloused and warm, and his grip was gentle but firm. She focused on that sensation, the solid reality of it, as the Reverend's words washed over her. The ceremony passed in a blur. Sarah heard herself making vows to a man whose last name she would now share, though she knew almost nothing about him. She felt Carter slide a ring onto her finger and realized with a start that it was his own signet ring, far too large for her slender hand but warm from his body. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife and told Carter he could kiss his bride, there was a moment of awkward hesitation. Carter leaned down, his eyes searching hers for permission. Sarah gave the smallest nod, and he pressed his lips to hers in the briefest, gentlest kiss imaginable. It was nothing like the passionate kisses Thomas had stolen during their courtship, but somehow it felt more honest. When he pulled back, his eyes held a promise that made her believe, for just a moment, that everything might actually be all right. The congregation seemed uncertain whether to celebrate or protest. A few people began to clap hesitantly, and then more joined in until there was genuine applause. Sarah's father had returned from his failed attempt to chase down Thomas, and he stood in the doorway of the church, his face a mask of confusion. Her mother had regained consciousness and was being helped to her feet by her sister, her expression one of complete bewilderment. Carter kept Sarah's hand in his as they walked back down the aisle together. People reached out to touch her dress, to offer congratulations or confusion, but she barely registered any of it. She had just married a complete stranger. The reality of what she had done was beginning to sink in, and with it came a wave of panic so strong she felt light-headed. Outside the church, the bright Nevada sun beat down mercilessly. There was supposed to be a reception at her parents' house, with food and music and dancing. Sarah had spent weeks planning every detail. Now it all seemed like a mockery. "Sarah," her mother's voice cut through her thoughts. Catherine Lancaster rushed forward, her face pale. "What have you done? You do not even know this man." "I have married him, Mother," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The alternative was to become the woman who was left at the altar. At least this way I am a married woman. But where will you go? What will you do?" Her mother's hands fluttered helplessly. "We know nothing about him. He could be anyone. He could be dangerous." Carter stepped forward, his voice respectful but firm. "Mrs. Lancaster, I understand your concern. My name is Carter Blake. I own the Running Creek Ranch about 20 miles north of here. I have 2 ranch hands who work for me, a man named Samuel Torres and his son Miguel. I raise cattle and break horses. I am not a wealthy man, but I am honest and hardworking, and I give you my word that I will take care of your daughter." William Lancaster pushed forward, his face still red with anger, though now it seemed directed at the world in general rather than anyone specific. "You will forgive me if I find it difficult to trust anyone's word at the moment," he said bitterly. My daughter was just abandoned by a man who swore he loved her. I understand, sir, Carter said calmly. I am not asking you to trust me. I am simply telling you the facts. Your daughter is my wife now, and I will treat her with the respect and care she deserves. You are welcome to visit the ranch anytime you wish to assure yourself of her well-being. Sarah's parents looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, her mother sighed heavily. The reception is already prepared, she said wearily. We might as well proceed with it. And it will give us a chance to learn more about you, Mr. Blake. The reception was one of the strangest events Sarah had ever experienced. Guests who had come expecting to celebrate her marriage to Thomas Chen now found themselves toasting her union with a complete stranger. The food her mother had spent days preparing was served. The musicians played the songs that had been requested weeks ago, and everyone tried very hard to pretend that this was a normal wedding celebration. Carter stayed close to Sarah's side, his presence both comforting and unsettling. He spoke to her parents with quiet courtesy, answering their questions about his ranch and his life with patient honesty. He had been born in Missouri, he told them, but had come west at 18 to seek his fortune. He had worked as a ranch hand for several years before saving enough money to buy his own land 4 years ago. He was 26 years old, had never been married, and had no family left alive. Sarah listened to him talk and tried to reconcile the fact that this man was now her husband. He seemed kind enough, and there was something solid and dependable about him that she found reassuring. But he was still a stranger, and by the end of the day, she would be leaving everything she had ever known to go live with him on a ranch she had never seen. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows across her parents' yard, Carter touched her elbow gently. "We should probably start heading to the ranch," he said quietly. "It is a few hours' ride, and I would prefer to arrive before full dark." Sarah's heart began to pound. This was it, the moment when her new life would truly begin. She nodded, unable to trust her voice, and went inside to change out of her wedding dress. Her mother helped her, both of them crying silently as they folded the white lace gown that Sarah had dreamed of wearing for months. It was supposed to have been the happiest day of her life, and instead it had turned into something completely unrecognizable. "Are you certain about this?" her mother asked one last time, gripping Sarah's hands tightly. "You could stay here. We could find a way through this." Sarah thought about it, truly considered it. But she knew the truth. If she stayed in Carson City, she would never escape what had happened today. Every person who looked at her would remember. Every social gathering would be tinged with awkwardness. She would be defined forever by Thomas's abandonment. "I am certain," she said, squeezing her mother's hands. "This is my choice, and I am going to see it through." She changed into a practical traveling dress and packed a trunk with her belongings. Her father loaded it onto Carter's wagon with rough, jerky movements that betrayed his emotional state. When everything was ready, Sarah hugged her parents goodbye, promising to write soon. Carter helped her up onto the wagon seat with careful hands, then climbed up beside her. He clicked to the horses, and they began to move. Sarah looked back at her parents' house, at the decorations still hanging in the yard, at the guests who were still milling about in confusion. Then she turned to face forward, toward the unknown future that awaited her. They rode in silence for a long time. The road north from Carson City was rough and dusty, cutting through scrubland dotted with sagebrush and the occasional pine tree. The sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink as it descended, and the air began to cool from the oppressive heat of the day. "Are you all right?" Carter asked finally, his voice gentle. Sarah let out a laugh that was half sob. "I honestly do not know. I married a stranger today instead of the man I thought I loved. I have left my home to go live somewhere I have never been. I think all right might be too generous a description." "Fair enough," Carter said with a slight smile. "For what it is worth, I think you are remarkably brave. Not many people could have handled today with the grace you showed." "I did not feel graceful," Sarah admitted. "I felt terrified and humiliated and angry." "You were all of those things, I am sure," Carter agreed. "But you did not let them control you. You made a choice and you stood by it." "That takes real courage." Sarah looked at him, studying his profile in the fading light. "Why did you really do it? Marry me, I mean. There must have been an easier way to find a wife." Carter was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses around a rough patch in the road. "I suppose there might have been," he said finally. "But I was not looking for easy. I was looking for someone strong, someone who would not fall apart when life got difficult. Ranch life is hard, Sarah. It requires someone tough enough to weather storms, both literal and figurative. When I saw you standing there, refusing to break down even though your world was crumbling around you, I thought that maybe you were the kind of person who could thrive in that life." "You got all of that from watching me for a few minutes?" Sarah asked skeptically. "I got enough," Carter said. "And I figured we could learn the rest as we went along. Marriage is a partnership, Sarah. I am not expecting you to love me or even to like me right away. But I am hoping that we can build something real together, something based on honesty and mutual respect." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different from the ones she had shed earlier. There was something in Carter's words that resonated with her, a straightforward honesty that Thomas had never possessed. Thomas had always told her what he thought she wanted to hear, had always been performing a role. Carter was simply being himself. "I will try," she said softly. "I cannot promise more than that right now." "Trying is all I ask," Carter replied. The ranch came into view just as the last light was fading from the sky. It was bigger than Sarah had expected, with a sturdy two-story house made of wood and stone, a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, and extensive corrals. In the gathering darkness, she could see the shapes of cattle dotting the surrounding hills. Two men emerged from the barn as the wagon approached. One was older, perhaps in his 50s, with graying hair and a weathered face. The other was younger, maybe 18 or 19, and bore enough resemblance to the older man to clearly be his son. "Boss, we were starting to worry," the older man called out, then stopped short when he saw Sarah. "Well, I will be. You went to town for supplies and came back with a wife." Carter climbed down from the wagon and held out a hand to help Sarah descend. "Samuel Miguel, I would like you to meet my wife, Sarah Blake. Sarah, this is Samuel Torres and his son Miguel. They keep this ranch running." Both men removed their hats respectfully. Samuel's eyes were kind as he looked at Sarah, though she could see the surprise and curiosity in his expression. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Blake," Samuel said. "This is certainly unexpected but welcome news. The boss here has been needing someone to share this big house with." Miguel, quieter than his father, simply nodded and smiled shyly. Carter began unloading Sarah's trunk and Miguel hurried to help him. "I will show you inside," Carter said to Sarah. "I am afraid it is not very fancy. I have been living alone here for 4 years and I am not much of a housekeeper." He carried her trunk up the porch steps and opened the door. The house was indeed simple, but surprisingly clean for a bachelor's home. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Stairs led up to what Sarah assumed were the bedrooms. Carter set her trunk down and lit a few lanterns, casting warm light across the room. "There are 3 bedrooms upstairs," he said, his tone careful. "The largest one has been mine, but you are welcome to it. I can move my things into one of the smaller rooms." Sarah understood what he was offering. Separate bedrooms, A marriage in name only, at least for now. The relief she felt was overwhelming. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I know this is an unusual situation and I appreciate your understanding." "We have time," Carter said simply. "There is no rush for anything. Let me show you around and then I will make us some supper. I imagine you must be exhausted." He gave her a tour of the house, pointing out where things were kept, explaining the quirks of the old stove, showing her the well out back. The house was comfortable and well built, clearly the work of someone who took pride in their home. Upstairs, the main bedroom was spacious and had windows on two sides that would let in plenty of light during the day. "I will move my things out tomorrow," Carter said. "For tonight, I will sleep downstairs. You should rest." But Sarah found that despite her exhaustion, sleep would not come. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the dark ceiling, and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had woken up as Sarah Lancaster, excited and nervous to marry Thomas Chen. Tonight, she was Sarah Blake, wife to a rancher she had met just hours ago. She thought about Thomas and was surprised to find that the pain of his betrayal was already dulling. Perhaps it was because her mind was too occupied with her current situation to dwell on the past. Or perhaps it was because, in some deep part of herself, she had known that Thomas was too good to be true. He had been charming and attentive, but there had always been something performative about it, as if he was playing a part rather than being genuine. Carter, on the other hand, seemed to be exactly who he appeared to be. A hard-working rancher, straightforward and honest, offering her a partnership rather than false promises of love. It was not what she had dreamed of, but dreams had a way of turning to dust. Maybe reality, solid and dependable, was worth more than dreams anyway. The next morning, Sarah woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs to find Carter already up and cooking breakfast. The early morning light streamed through the windows, and she could see the ranch more clearly now. It was beautiful in a stark, rugged way, with rolling hills stretching out in every direction. "Good morning," Carter said, looking up from the stove. "I hope you were able to sleep some. I made coffee if you would like some." "Thank you," Sarah said, accepting the cup he poured for her. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what she needed. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, and then Carter showed her more of the ranch. He introduced her to the horses, explaining which ones were gentle enough for her to ride once she learned. He showed her the garden plot behind the house, currently overgrown with weeds. "I have never had much time to tend it," he admitted. "But if you wanted to plant vegetables or whatever you like, you are welcome to it." Over the following days, Sarah began to settle into her new life. Carter was true to his word, treating her with consistent respect and kindness. He moved his belongings into one of the smaller bedrooms without complaint and made sure she had everything she needed. He taught her about the ranch, patiently explaining the daily routines and answering her endless questions. Samuel and Miguel were friendly and welcoming, though Sarah could tell they were curious about the sudden marriage. She learned that Samuel's wife had died 3 years earlier, and he and Miguel had been working for Carter ever since. They lived in a small house on the far side of the property and took most of their meals there, though Samuel often joined Carter for coffee in the mornings. Sarah threw herself into making the house a home, needing to keep busy to avoid dwelling on how much her life had changed. She cleaned and organized, sewed new curtains for the windows, and started working on the garden. The physical labor was exhausting but satisfying, and she fell into bed each night too tired to lie awake worrying. Carter was often up before dawn and worked until after sunset, but he always made time to check on her, to make sure she had everything she needed. They ate their meals together, and gradually they began to talk more. Not about anything deep or personal at first, just small conversations about the ranch, the weather, the neighbors she had not yet met. Sarah found herself watching him sometimes when he did not know she was looking. The way he moved with confident ease, the careful gentleness with which he handled the horses, the quiet authority he had with Samuel and Miguel. He was nothing like Thomas, who had been all flash and charm. Carter was solid and real, a man who let his actions speak louder than his words. 2 weeks after their wedding, a letter arrived from Sarah's mother. Carter brought it in from town along with the other supplies he had gone to fetch, and Sarah tore it open eagerly, hungry for news from home. Her mother wrote that Thomas and Victoria had indeed gone to San Francisco, where Thomas was apparently helping Victoria's father open a new bank branch. The scandal had rocked Carson City, but opinions seemed divided. Some people condemned Thomas for his cowardice and praised Sarah for her quick thinking in marrying Carter. Others whispered that there must have been something wrong with Sarah for Thomas to leave her. Sarah's hands shook as she read, old anger and humiliation rising up again. Carter, who was putting away the supplies, noticed her distress. "Bad news?" he asked quietly. Sarah handed him the letter without a word. He read it carefully, his expression darkening. "People always need someone to blame," he said finally, handing the letter back. "But the only person at fault here is the man who made a promise and broke it. You did nothing wrong, Sarah." "Then why does it still hurt so much?" she asked, her voice breaking. Carter crossed the room and, after a moment's hesitation, put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Because betrayal always hurts, even when we know intellectually that it was not our fault. You are allowed to grieve for what you thought you had, Sarah. You are allowed to be angry and hurt, but do not let it make you doubt yourself." Sarah looked up at him, at the genuine concern in his gray eyes, and felt something shift inside her chest. This man, who barely knew her, was showing her more kindness and understanding than Thomas ever had. She reached up and placed her hand over his, squeezing gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. For rescuing me that day, for being patient with me, for not asking for more than I can give right now." "You do not need to thank me," Carter said softly. "We are partners, remember? Partners help each other." As the weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself growing more comfortable in her new life. She learned to ride the gentler horses and would often accompany Carter on his rounds of the ranch. She got the garden producing vegetables and started baking bread, filling the house with warm, yeasty smells that made it feel more like a home. She also started to notice things about Carter that surprised her. The way he would leave wildflowers on the kitchen table sometimes, picked during his morning rides. How he always made sure to compliment her cooking, even when she knew it was not very good because she was still learning. The careful way he respected her space and privacy, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. One evening in late August, they sat on the porch together watching the sunset. It had become something of a routine for them, this quiet time at the end of the day when the work was done and they could just be together without any expectations. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Of course," Carter replied, turning to look at her. "That day in the church, what made you so certain that marrying me was the right thing to do? Were you not afraid?" Carter considered the question seriously. "Terrified," he admitted with a slight smile. "I thought I had lost my mind, but there was something about you, Sarah. A strength and dignity that drew me to you. And honestly, I have been lonely out here. I always thought I would marry someday, find someone to build a life with, but I never seemed to have the time or opportunity. When I saw you standing there, it felt like maybe fate was giving me a chance I should not pass up." "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked quietly. "Now that you know me better, do you wish you had just walked away?" "No," Carter said firmly, turning to face her fully. Not for a single moment. You have made this house a home, Sarah. You have brought light and warmth into my life in ways I did not even know I was missing. If anything, I worry that you regret it, that you wish you had chosen differently. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and realized with a start that somewhere along the way her feelings had changed. This man was no longer a stranger who had offered her a convenient escape. He had become someone important to her, someone she looked forward to seeing each morning, someone whose opinion mattered. I do not regret it, she said softly. I thought I would, but I do not. You have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect, Carter. You have given me space to heal and time to find myself again. I am grateful for that. Something in the air between them shifted, a charge of awareness that had not been there before. Carter reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and Sarah felt her breath catch. Sarah, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I know our marriage started in an unconventional way. I know I promised not to rush you or expect things from you, but I need you to know that my feelings have changed. I care about you, deeply, and if there is any chance that you might feel the same way, I would like to know. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. She thought about Thomas, about the shallow infatuation she had mistaken for love. What she felt for Carter was different, deeper, built on a foundation of respect and genuine affection. I do feel the same way, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I did not expect to, but I do. You have become important to me, Carter, more important than I realized until just now. The smile that spread across Carter's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. He cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones, and leaned in slowly. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like their brief, awkward kiss at the altar. This kiss was full of promise and possibility, gentle but passionate, and it made Sarah's toes curl in her boots. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Carter rested his forehead against hers. I think I am falling in love with you, Sarah Blake, he murmured. I think I might be falling in love with you too, Carter Blake, she replied, and felt him smile against her hair as he pulled her close. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Sarah did not sleep in the main bedroom alone. Carter carried her upstairs, kissing her softly, asking permission with every touch. They came together slowly, gently, learning each other in the lamplight. It was nothing like Sarah had imagined her wedding night would be, but it was perfect in its own way, full of tenderness and genuine emotion. Afterwards, lying in Carter's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Sarah felt a peace she had not known since before that terrible day at the church. Are you happy? Carter asked quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Yes, Sarah said, surprised to realize she meant it completely. I am truly happy. The seasons changed, and with them, Sarah's life continued to transform. By autumn, she and Carter were truly partners in every sense of the word. She had learned to help with the ranch work, could rope a calf almost as well as Miguel, and had turned the neglected garden into a productive source of fresh vegetables. Her parents came to visit in October, nervous and uncertain about what they would find. Sarah watched their faces as Carter showed them around the ranch, pointing out improvements they had made together, talking about their plans for the future. She saw her mother's expression soften as she observed the way Carter looked at Sarah, the gentle way he touched her hand when he thought no one was watching. He loves you, her mother said that evening when they had a moment alone. That man truly loves you, Sarah. I know, Sarah replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. And I love him too. I know it is not how you imagined things would turn out, but I am happy, Mother, truly happy." Her mother hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. "That is all I have ever wanted for you, darling. Happiness." "I admit I had my doubts about this marriage, but I can see now that it was the best thing that could have happened. That Carter is a good man." The winter was harsh, with heavy snows that sometimes left them isolated for days at a time. But Sarah found that she did not mind being snowed in with Carter. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for when spring came. Carter taught her to play chess, and she taught him the card games her grandmother had shown her as a child. One particularly cold night in January of 1877, as they lay together in the darkness, Sarah told Carter something she had been keeping secret for a few weeks. "I am with child," she said softly, feeling his body go still beneath her. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "As certain as I can be. I have all the signs my mother told me about." Carter pulled her close, his hand coming to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby. Sarah, I cannot even put into words how happy this makes me." "You are not worried?" Sarah asked. "It is so soon, and we have only been truly together for a few months." "I am not worried at all," Carter assured her. "Yes, it is soon, but we are married, we love each other, and we have a good home to raise a child in. What more could we need?" The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into spring. Sarah's mother came to stay for the last month, fussing over her daughter and driving Carter slightly mad with her constant worries. But when the time came in early July, Sarah was grateful for her mother's steady presence. The birth was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Carter paced the floor downstairs, wearing a path in the wooden boards, while Samuel tried unsuccessfully to distract him with conversation. When he finally heard the thin, angry wail of a newborn, he took the stairs 3 at a time. Sarah's mother met him at the bedroom door, her face tired but beaming. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, strong son, and Sarah is fine, just exhausted." Carter found his wife propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat but her face glowing as she held a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up as he entered, and the smile she gave him made his heart feel too large for his chest. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Carter crossed to the bed on shaky legs and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn the same gray as his father's. He was perfect. "He is beautiful," Carter whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers closed reflexively around his father's much larger finger, and Carter felt tears prick his eyes. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking James," Sarah said, "after your father." Carter looked at her in surprise. He had told her about his father, who had died when Carter was young, but he had not expected her to remember. "James Blake," he said, testing the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." Sarah laughed tiredly. "I am a mess, but thank you for saying so. Carter, we really did it. We made a family." "We did," he agreed, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Against all odds, we made something beautiful." James proved to be a healthy, happy baby who rarely cried and seemed fascinated by everything around him. Samuel and Miguel doted on him, and Sarah's parents visited frequently, unable to stay away from their first grandchild for long. As James grew from infant to toddler, Sarah and Carter's love continued to deepen. They had their disagreements, of course, like any couple, but they had learned to talk through their problems rather than letting them fester. The foundation of respect and honesty they had built their marriage on served them well. On their second anniversary, Carter surprised Sarah by taking her to the spot where he had first bought the ranch land. It was a high point that overlooked the whole spread, with views that stretched for miles. "I wanted to bring you here because this is where my dream began," he told her, his arm around her waist as they looked out over the land. "4 years ago, I stood on this spot and imagined building something lasting, something meaningful. I pictured a house, a family, a real home. But it was just a vague dream, something I hoped might happen someday." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "And then you came into my life in the most unexpected way, and suddenly everything became real. You turned my dream into reality, Sarah. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to work hard and plan for the future. I know our start was unconventional, but I would not change a single thing about how we came together, because it brought me you." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. "I love you," she said simply. "I loved Thomas, or thought I did, but it was nothing compared to what I feel for you. You are my partner, my best friend, my home. That day at the church, when you offered me your hand, you saved me. But more than that, you gave me a chance at real happiness, and I will be grateful for that for the rest of my life." They kissed as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years that followed were full and rich. Sarah gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter named Emma when James was 3, and another son named William 2 years after that. The ranch prospered under Carter and Sarah's joint management, growing to include more land and cattle. They built a new barn and expanded the house to accommodate their growing family. Samuel eventually retired, though he and Miguel stayed on the ranch in their small house, now considered family rather than employees. Miguel married a local girl named Rosa, and they gave Samuel grandchildren to spoil. Sarah's relationship with her parents healed completely, and they became regular fixtures at the ranch, especially during holidays. Even her father, who had been so angry and suspicious at first, came to deeply respect and appreciate Carter. They heard news of Thomas occasionally through the years. He and Victoria had married and moved to San Francisco, where Thomas worked in banking. Sarah felt nothing when she heard his name now, no anger or pain, just a mild curiosity about the life she might have had. She much preferred the life she had chosen. On their 10th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Sarah's parents, Samuel and his growing family, neighbors from the surrounding ranches, all came together to honor the unusual marriage that had become a legendary love story in the area. That evening, after the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Sarah and Carter sat on their porch, watching the stars come out. It was the same spot where they had first admitted their feelings for each other all those years ago. "You ever think about that day?" Sarah asked. "The day you saw a stranger in a church and decided to marry her," Carter laughed, pulling her closer against his side. "I think about it all the time. I still cannot quite believe I had the courage to do it, or the crazy luck that you said yes." "It was not luck," Sarah said. "It was fate. It had to be. What else could explain how everything fell into place so perfectly?" "Maybe," Carter agreed. "Or maybe it was just 2 people who were brave enough to take a chance on each other when the opportunity presented itself. Either way, I am grateful for it every single day." "Me too," Sarah said softly. "Thomas thought he was leaving me with nothing that day, but actually he gave me everything. If he had shown up and married me like he was supposed to, I would have had a mediocre marriage with a mediocre man. Instead, I got you. I got this life, this family, this love. I got everything I never knew I wanted." Carter turned her face toward his and kissed her slowly, deeply, with all the passion and tenderness of 10 years together. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Here is to another 40 years of this," he murmured. "At least 40," Sarah agreed with a smile. And as they sat together under the vast Nevada sky, surrounded by the life they had built together, Sarah reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been abandoned at the altar by a man who claimed to love her. A stranger had witnessed her humiliation and offered her an escape. She had taken a leap of faith into the unknown, and it had led her to a love deeper and truer than anything she had ever imagined possible. The children grew and thrived. James proved to have his father's steady temperament and love for ranch work. From the time he could walk, he followed Carter everywhere, soaking up everything his father could teach him about cattle, horses, and the land. By the time he was 15, he was already talking about staying on the ranch, about building his own house on the property someday and raising his own family there. Emma inherited her mother's quick mind and her father's determination. She was fierce and fearless, often riding out with the men during roundups and proving herself as capable as any of them. She had her mother's auburn hair and her father's gray eyes, and she turned heads wherever she went. Sarah watched her daughter with pride and a touch of anxiety, hoping Emma would find someone who appreciated her strength rather than being threatened by it. William, the youngest, was the dreamer of the family. He loved books and learning and was always asking questions about everything. Carter built him a small desk in the corner of the main room where William could read and study. Sarah taught him everything she had learned growing up, and they talked about perhaps sending him to school in Carson City when he was older, though the idea of having any of her children so far away made Sarah's heart ache. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Carter's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher spread throughout Nevada, and the Running Creek Ranch became known as one of the finest cattle operations in the territory. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle diseases and fluctuating markets, but their partnership saw them through every challenge. Sarah became active in the small community that had grown up around the surrounding ranches. She helped organize a church service that rotated between different homes, taught other ranch wives how to preserve vegetables from their gardens, and was always ready to help when a neighbor was sick or struggling. The woman who had once been the subject of pitying whispers in Carson City became a respected and beloved figure in her new home. One autumn day when Sarah was 35 and Carter was 39, they received an unexpected visitor. A fancy carriage came up the long road to the ranch house, looking completely out of place among the practical wagons and horses. Sarah was in the garden when she saw it approach, and something about it made her uneasy. The carriage stopped, and the driver opened the door. Out stepped Victoria Chen, looking elegant and sophisticated in a traveling suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. Behind her came Thomas, older now, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes. Sarah felt Carter come up behind her, his hand settling protectively on her shoulder. Together they watched their unexpected guests approach. "Hello, Sarah," Thomas said, his voice uncertain. "I know this is unexpected. I hope we are not intruding." Sarah studied the couple before her. Thomas looked uncomfortable, avoiding her eyes. Victoria, surprisingly, met her gaze directly with something that might have been respect. "What brings you all the way out here?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice neutral. Carter's hand squeezed her shoulder gently, a silent message of support. "We were passing through on our way to Sacramento," Victoria said, her voice cool and composed. "I wanted to stop. I felt I owed you an apology." That surprised Sarah enough that she gestured toward the house. "Perhaps you should come inside." They sat in the main room, Sarah and Carter on one side, Thomas and Victoria on the other. Sarah served coffee and the cake she had made that morning, going through the motions of hospitality while her mind raced. "I know what Thomas and I did was unforgivable," Victoria began, not bothering with small talk. "We destroyed your wedding day, humiliated you publicly, and ran away like cowards. I was young and selfish, and I convinced myself that what I was doing was romantic rather than cruel. I wanted to apologize for that, even though I know words cannot undo the damage we caused." Sarah looked at Thomas, who was staring into his coffee cup. "And you? What do you have to say?" Thomas finally met her eyes, and Sarah was startled to see genuine remorse there. "I was a fool," he said simply. "I thought I knew what I wanted, thought I was following my heart, but I was just chasing an illusion. I am sorry, Sarah, truly sorry for the pain I caused you." Sarah felt Carter's hand find hers under the table, his fingers lacing through hers. She looked at this couple who had once caused her such anguish and felt a surprising lack of anger. They looked tired and sad despite their obvious wealth. Victoria's elegant appearance could not hide the unhappiness in her eyes, and Thomas had the demeanor of a man who had compromised himself too many times. "I appreciate your apology," Sarah said carefully. "Both of you. I will not pretend that what you did not hurt, because it did. That day at the church was the worst day of my life at the time, but I have come to realize that it was also a gift." She squeezed Carter's hand and continued, "If you had married me, Thomas, I would have had a very different life. Probably a perfectly acceptable life by most standards. But it would not have been this life. It would not have been with this man, on this ranch with these children. So in a strange way, I need to thank you. Your betrayal led me to something much better than I ever could have found with you." Thomas flinched at her words, but nodded slowly. "You were always too good for me, Sarah. I knew it even then, which is probably why I ran. I knew I would never be able to live up to what you deserved." The conversation continued for another hour, stilted but civil. Sarah learned that Thomas and Victoria had 3 children, that Thomas worked long hours at the bank, that they lived in a grand house in San Francisco, but rarely spent time together. It sounded lonely and hollow, despite all their wealth and social standing. When they finally left, Sarah and Carter stood on the porch and watched the carriage disappear down the road. "How do you feel?" Carter asked quietly. Sarah thought about it. "Grateful," she said finally. "Grateful that I ended up here instead of there. Grateful that you were brave enough to offer me your hand that day. Grateful for every moment of this life we have built together." Carter pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I am the grateful one," he murmured. "You could have said no. You could have chosen to face the scandal rather than marry a stranger. But you took a chance on me, and it is the best thing that has ever happened to me." That evening, as Sarah tucked William into bed and listened to him read from his favorite book, as she checked on Emma, who had fallen asleep with hay still in her hair from helping in the barn, as she kissed James goodnight and heard him excitedly describe the calf that had been born that day, she felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. This was her life. These were her children. This was her home. And tomorrow she would wake up next to the man she loved, the man who had seen her at her lowest moment and offered her hope instead of pity. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life. Calving season and roundups, planting and harvest, summer heat and winter snow. Sarah's hair began to show threads of silver, and Carter's face grew more lined, but their love only deepened with time. James turned 18 and, as expected, announced that he wanted to stay on the ranch. Carter divided off a portion of land for him and helped him build a small house. Within a year, James brought home a wife, a rancher's daughter named Beth from a neighboring spread. Soon after, they made Carter and Sarah grandparents with a baby girl they named Caroline. Emma shocked everyone by falling in love with a schoolteacher who came to Carson City from Boston. David Foster was nothing like the rough rancher Sarah had imagined her daughter with, but he adored Emma and respected her independent spirit. They married when Emma was 20 and moved to Carson City, where Emma scandalized the town by helping David teach at the school rather than simply keeping house. William, true to his scholarly nature, went east to college when he turned 18. It broke Sarah's heart to have him so far away, but she knew it was what he needed. He wrote long letters full of his studies and his experiences, and he came home every summer, always amazed by how much he had missed the ranch. On their 25th anniversary, Carter planned an elaborate celebration. He had kept it secret from Sarah, but with help from the children, he organized a party that brought together everyone from their life together. Sarah's parents, now elderly but still sharp, made the journey from Carson City. Samuel, retired and gray but still spry, came with his entire extended family. Neighbors from all the surrounding ranches attended. Even William came home early from school to surprise his mother. When Sarah walked out to find the yard transformed with lanterns and decorations, tables groaning with food, and what seemed like half of Nevada gathered to celebrate, she burst into tears. "Happy anniversary," Carter whispered in her ear, holding her as she cried happy tears. 25 years ago, I saw a woman in a church and made the craziest decision of my life. Best decision I ever made. The party lasted long into the night. People danced and ate and shared stories. Sarah's father made a toast, his voice gruff with emotion as he admitted that he had been wrong to doubt Carter all those years ago. "I wanted my daughter to marry a rich man," he said, raising his glass. "A man of status and importance. Instead, she married a simple rancher. But Carter Blake gave my daughter something far more valuable than money or status. He gave her love, respect, and partnership. He gave her a good life and a happy home. He is the best son-in-law I could have asked for, even if it took me a while to realize it." As Sarah danced with Carter under the stars, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, their friends and neighbors, she thought back to that terrified young woman standing at the altar 25 years ago. That woman could never have imagined this moment, this life, this overwhelming sense of joy and belonging. "What are you thinking about?" Carter asked, pulling her closer as they swayed to the music. "I am thinking about how wrong things can go so right," Sarah said. "How the worst day of my life led to the best years of my life. How a stranger became my everything." "Not a stranger anymore," Carter said with a smile. "Now you are stuck with me." "Stuck with you," Sarah repeated, laughing. "That makes it sound like a burden. When really, being with you has been the greatest gift of my life." They danced until late, and when the party finally wound down and the last guests had gone home, they walked hand in hand through their ranch, this place that had become so much more than just land and buildings. It was the physical manifestation of their partnership, their love, their life together. The children eventually married and had families of their own, though they all stayed connected to the ranch in various ways. James took over more of the daily operations as Carter grew older, allowing his father to take things easier. Emma and David had 4 children who spent every summer at the ranch, running wild and learning to ride just like their mother had. William became a professor, but always came home for Christmas and important family events, bringing his wife Margaret and their 2 sons. Sarah's parents passed away within months of each other when Sarah was in her 50s, both of them content in the knowledge that their daughter had built a beautiful life. Samuel followed a few years later, dying peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82. Each loss was felt deeply by the ranch family, but they weathered the grief together. supporting each other through the pain. As Carter and Sarah entered their 60s, they began to slow down. The hard physical labor of ranch life became more difficult, though both of them still insisted on doing their share of the work. They had raised strong children and built something lasting, and they could look back on their lives with deep satisfaction. One evening, on their 40th anniversary, they sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The ranch was bustling with 3 generations of Blakes now, with James and Beth raising their children in the house James had built, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren running around during visits. 40 years, Sarah said wonderingly. When you offered me your hand in that church, could you have imagined we would make it this far? Carter reached over and took her hand, his fingers still fitting perfectly between hers despite the arthritis that now plagued them both. Honestly, no. I had no idea if you would even say yes. I just knew I had to try. I had to offer you a way out and hope that maybe, just maybe, we could make something good out of a terrible situation. We made something extraordinary, Sarah said firmly. We made a life, a family, a legacy. Our children are good people who know how to work hard and love deeply. Our grandchildren are growing up strong and happy. This ranch will continue long after we are gone. That is more than most people can say. Carter brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. It is more than I ever dared to dream, and it is all because of you, Sarah. You took a chance on me when you had no reason to trust anyone. You built this home, raised our children, stood by my side through everything. I have loved you more with each passing year. And I have loved you, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. From that scared girl who said yes to a stranger, to this old woman who cannot imagine a single day without you. You are my heart, Carter Blake. They sat together as the sun set, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant colors, and watched their family moving about the ranch. It was everything they had worked for, everything they had built together. Carter passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, with Sarah holding his hand. The whole community turned out for his funeral, testament to the respect and affection he had earned over his lifetime. Sarah grieved deeply, but found comfort in her children and grandchildren, in the land they had worked together, in the memories of 47 years of marriage. She lived another 8 years after Carter's death, staying active and involved in the ranch until the very end. She taught her great-grandchildren to garden, told them stories about their grandfather, and made sure they knew the history of how their family came to be. On a warm summer evening, sitting on the porch with James beside her and surrounded by the sounds of her family, Sarah closed her eyes and simply did not wake up. She was 81 years old, and she left behind a legacy of love and strength that would continue for generations. At her funeral, Emma stood up to speak about her mother. She told the story that everyone knew but never tired of hearing, the story of a bride abandoned at the altar and a cowboy brave enough to offer his hand. My mother could have let that betrayal define her, Emma said, tears streaming down her face. She could have become bitter and closed off. Instead, she chose to take a risk. She chose to believe in the possibility of love even when she had every reason not to. And because of that choice, all of us are here today. My father used to say that seeing my mother in that church was the luckiest moment of his life. But my mother always said the luck was hers. The truth is, they were both blessed to have found each other. Sarah was buried next to Carter on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a large oak tree they had planted together on their 10th anniversary. The headstone reads simply, Sarah Lancaster Blake, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She chose love. And in the years that followed, as the ranch continued to thrive under new generations of Blakes, as great-great-grandchildren who never knew Carter and Sarah personally still heard their story, the legend of their love endured. It became a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the greatest blessings, that courage and hope can transform tragedy into triumph, and that true love can be found in the most unexpected places. The Running Creek Ranch still stands today, still in the Blake family, a testament to the partnership between a woman who was abandoned and the cowboy who witnessed it and offered his hand instead. Their story lived on in every sunrise over the Nevada hills, in every generation that worked the land they had built together, in every couple who heard their tale and believed that real love was possible. Because Sarah Lancaster had walked into a church expecting to marry one man and walked out married to a stranger instead. And that stranger became her partner, her best friend, her great love. Together, they proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when everything falls apart, if we are just brave enough to reach for the hand being offered and step into the unknown. Their children made sure the story was passed down, told and retold to each new generation. How a betrayal led to a blessing. How a moment of courage changed the course of a family's history. How love built on respect and honesty could weather any storm and last a lifetime. And so the story of Carter and Sarah Blake became more than just their own. It became a beacon of hope, a reminder that our darkest moments can lead to our brightest days, and that sometimes the hand of a stranger offers not just rescue, but a chance at a love deeper and truer than we ever imagined possible.